Hey everyone, I'm Jay Smith, and this is Bradley Kendall, and this is After Further Review. And we'll get into the spring game news in a second, but first, Bradley, after further review?
Past, present, and
3 today. The past dealing with the Heisman Trophy, the present dealing with the spring game, and the future looking ahead to next season. So let's talk. I know ESPN put out some things a few days ago. They kind of released their early Heisman polling. Who was at the top? Who's at the top of your list?
I think a lot of people's are going to be kind of the same. I personally decided to start with the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, Lamar Jackson, coming back for another campaign, looking to get even better. You know, coming off a year where he had 51 touchdowns. The only real question mark I would have going into his season would be his completion percentage and the fact that he's lost now 3 key players from last season. But the schedule looks favorable, and the ACC, you know, after he tore it up last season, looks like he could do it again this year.
Perhaps. He had a pretty rough stretch to close the season. I know I harped on that quite a bit. I'm looking at ESPN's. They had Sam Darnold in first at a 5-1 odds. They had Lamar Jackson second, 8-1 odds, and then JT.
Ohio State people working on that
10-1
committee.
odds.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm kind of surprised that Browning is not included here. Jake Browning from Washington.
You were surprised last year, too, when he didn't go.
I would list my top 3 right now, though. I would probably put Darnold at 1, Browning at 2, and Lamar at 3. I think that ESPN is pretty much on par here. I don't understand why JT Barrett is getting so much love.
Probably just because he's a senior and he's been there before.
Possibly.
But the fact that he didn't throw the ball at all, like last year at all, then I just don't see it.
And you can't argue that Ohio State performed any better in their semifinal game than Washington did when they played Alabama.
Yeah.
So
I think one thing to look at, they're going to be a more experienced team. They were a really young squad last year, so maybe the pieces around him weren't really fitting for him to have a breakout year. Maybe this year he could turn the corner. But I just don't see
possibly,
it. Yeah.
And I do get the whole, like, Lamar will, possibly continue his dominance, and although he could have a sophomore slump, is Sam Darnold for USC. They have so many weapons. Their recruiting is picking up again, and I think the Trojans are going to be hot this year.
I don't really feel safe with them, but I think the hype's going to be a little too much for him. Like with USC in years past, someone kind of faltered to begin with. It's going to be kind of hard to replicate what he did last year, and the target's going to be on him
But
now.
again, I think we talked about too in the fall how the Pac-12 isn't as deep as it used to be.
True.
So, I mean, besides maybe Washington, if they continue what they had, and maybe Colorado, if they play well defensively, I think USC's poised for a Pac-12 championship.
No doubt. I mean, they're really high on all the ranking boards. You know, we talked earlier about who our preseason favorites were. I think we both went with, like, Washington and Colorado, but USC's definitely in the mix. For me, the safe bet, and, not going to be the popular pick amongst people that know college football, Baker Mayfield. And I know he's kind of a jerk, but on the field,
he's been playing for like 5 years now.
Which he's going to bring to the table, and he plays in the Big 12. I mean, that's got to count for something.
I know that we can agree that it's going to be a quarterback battle.
Absolutely.
I think that it's going to this year will probably be a quarterback winner for the Heisman.
Penn State is about to take the Big Ten by storm. There's not the only real reason that he didn't get a lot of recognition last year is because there were so many great running backs. They're all gone. He's basically the only one left. And he's on a really good team. I think Penn State's got a great chance to showcase his talent.
And they had a good season last year. But let's go ahead and take a quick break. When we come back, we will be looking at spring game news, and we're going to be joined by our expert panelist on tonight's show. Hey everyone, welcome back, and now we're going to get into the spring game news talk. We're going to spend a few minutes kind of going over some different highlights. One thing that I wanted to touch on was relating to the Ohio State spring game, and they had this teenager named Jacob Jarvis who has muscular dystrophy, and he got to score a touchdown in the Ohio State spring game. There's actually a video of him. I think it's JT Barrett snaps in the ball, hands it off to him, and then he uses a little motorized scooter and goes through Ohio State line and is able to score a touchdown.
Best part about that was that the defenders were unbelievable.
Of course.
Really feel good story.
I think it was in front of a sellout crowd in the Horseshoe. There was upwards of 80,000 people.
They're usually up there in terms of attendance.
Huge attendance rolled, and I think that's been something that he had wanted to do for a long time. And there was another instance not too long ago where I think it was at Nebraska where they had a kid that had cancer. and they allowed him to score a touchdown.
And speaking of Nebraska, this year what they did, they took an Army staff sergeant who was coming home to see his family, and really creative idea. You've seen a lot of military welcomings where they welcome him back.
Yeah.
This is the one where he disguised himself as a player, and during the coin flip, went out with all the other players, took off his helmet, and his family was right there. His kid was doing the coin flip. So
awesome.
Another really cool story. Good on Nebraska.
With troops coming home, it is always a really touching one.
Absolutely.
I saw one where one time they rolled out this Coke machine in like the end zone, and the family was out there, and then
that was at Clemson, wasn't it?
The Coke machine
was
there.
If I'm not mistaken,
it might have been a Clemson game. Those are always really neat to see. But besides that, a lot of spring games going on around the country.
Yep.
Some of them have pretty much already wrapped up, though. I know we talked about Clemson's extensively in last week's show, but nothing really jumps out besides.
No, I mean, a lot of what you kind of expected. I mean, USC obviously showcased Sam Darnold. One in particular we're going to be talking about pretty soon is Auburn with Jarrett Stidham. He was their new transfer to come in. A lot of buzz around him at quarterback, and a lot of people really excited to see what he could produce. Auburn finally needs a good quarterback, and it looks like they might have it.
And I think that's always typically when you go to watch a spring game, the biggest question you have in your mind, especially if you've lost your starting quarterback of years prior, what's the quarterback play going to be like? And besides with Auburn, there weren't too many surprises.
No.
Everybody pretty much performed as expected across the country. Well, this guy might start now or may have a dual quarterback system, so everything was pretty much under the radar.
I think a lot of coaches know that it is the spring game and they still have a lot of time left. So, I mean, people can have their gut reactions on stuff like this, but I think a lot of coaches are pretty optimistic that they know they have a lot of time left to work with these players.
Yeah. Well, now we are going to have our friend Jackson, who's going to talk with us about the NFL draft for 5 or so minutes. If we can go ahead and get Jackson on. Jackson, what's going on?
It's going great. Thank you.
We're going to talk to you about the NFL draft and just kind of go over some of your thoughts on the upcoming draft.
Well, I think this draft is really deep at a few positions, especially at the cornerback position. There's about 6 of them that can maybe go in the first round, and especially at tight end. This is probably the best tight end class we've had in about 10 years. You have several guys that can go in the first round, including Howard. You have Njoku from Miami, Ingram from Ole Miss, and then even Leggett could maybe go in the first round. I see him more as a second-round guy. And then also you have a lot of guys at center and running back. This running back class could be the first class in a while to have a lot of guys go in the first round with, you have Devontae,
You have Fournette, you've got Cook, you've got Joe Mixon.
Yeah.
Although I did see the other day that Mixon's draft stock dropped. For some reason, there was some. I know he had the incident at the combine.
He's had the off-the-field stuff.
Right.
That's mainly
And
what people are talking about.
Could be an issue, but I think, like you pointed out, Leggett could be, a quality tight end pick for a team that's look. Because when Dwayne Allen graduated Clemson, I feel like he kind of started a progression of good tight end play at Clemson, and he's done well in the NFL.
And we've seen across the NFL how a big tight end could lead you to a championship. The Patriots have done it. The Panthers have done it with Greg Olsen. So an athletic tight end is something that people really need in terms of their teams. But looking at the quarterbacks, I know this is going to be a lot of buzz going into the draft. Who do you have, Jackson, in terms of your first quarterback taking? Because I know a lot of people are saying Trubisky, some people are saying Watson, even some people saying Mahomes. Who do you got up there?
I got Trubisky going first.
Do you really?
I really think so. I think he might go to the Chargers at 7, and if not, I can maybe see the Browns maybe trading up and getting him because he came right from outside Cleveland. That's kind of like where he grew up, so I can see him really going to Cleveland. But if Cleveland doesn't do that, I can see them picking up Watson. I think Watson's the most pro-ready quarterback right now. He's the guy that you're going to want to get if you are trying to win games. You're trying to win playoff games. So I see him maybe going to the Texans, maybe the Browns, maybe a couple other teams. But I don't see him really as a developmental quarterback for some of these teams that are drafting up in the top 10 or top 15.
So you feel like it's safe to say that Watson will be a guy that's expected to come in and start almost immediately? And
That's what I would say.
Because I don't think anybody questions his leadership and his character and his integrity off the field. But you're saying that you feel like Watson is going to be more of a franchise.
Here's the thing. I would say Watson's probably the most draft ready. Trubisky's the one with the most potential. I think that's what people are trying to get at is Trubisky has the most
Potential's a tricky word, though.
He's got the most tangibles. Watson's probably got the most intangibles that can lead a team like the Texans, which would be a killer combination to see him and DeAndre Hopkins go at it.
Absolutely.
I think the wild card here is Mahomes because not a lot of people know about him from Texas Tech.
Yeah,
What's your thoughts on him?
I think Mahomes might go early in the first round. I have him at some points. I have him might possibly going to either the Saints or the Cardinals in that top 15. But if not, he might go to the Texans because he grew up right from outside Texas. His dad played for the Rangers, so he knows how to play ball in Texas, and he has a killer arm. His arm is going to be good in the pros.
Exactly. Yeah, he could really make a difference right from the beginning if people take a chance on him. You never know.
I'm curious though, relating to running backs. You know, you've obviously we just touched on Fournette. You've got Cook. You've got McCaffrey, who
didn't even do any private workouts, which was a lot of questions.
I mean,
behind
do you
that.
think that teams are sleeping on Christian McCaffrey because he didn't have that
And his
great
size?
of
Yeah.
a senior season? I mean, is this somebody that could really be a difference maker, like a fullback?
I think McCaffrey's probably rising up the board. I have him going to the Eagles at 14. He's doing really well recently, and I think he'd be a great combination with Darren Sproles. I think the person that's sliding back on mine right now is Dalvin Cook, because a lot of people have problems with his shoulder issues. They're afraid that that's going to linger into the pros, and if they're going to draft a running back in the top 15, top 20 picks, they're going to want that guy to be there for about at least 8 years and be a really good starter for their team. Like they want a guy like Adrian Peterson that's going to give them good, steady production for at least 8 years of just hard-nosed football running up the gut.
Now, you talked about injuries or potential injuries coming into the draft. Didn't Fournette have some issues with his knee?
Well, Fournette's had stuff his entire career at LSU.
Right, but he's always been considered one of the premier backs in the country.
When he's healthy, and that's the
Right.
big if,
Well,
when he's
yeah.
healthy. I think a lot of people were willing to take the risk on that just because of his sheer size and the potential he's got to be a difference maker in the NFL. But yeah, Cook, I mean, a lot of people knew that he had a lot of injuries in college. That could definitely play a difference in his draft stock, no doubt.
One last thought, Jackson. What about Wayne Gallman? Do you feel like him, I mean, he's a smaller guy, do you feel like he has a chance to be productive at the next level in the NFL?
I think he does. He reminds me a lot of T.J. Yeldon, and seeing the success T.J. Yeldon has, I think Gallman probably can fit a mold in some facet of the NFL. But I don't see him being that every down type get back, taking up a lot of the yardage count for his team. I see him as a nice little back that can go to the outside, a nice back that can, catch a lot of screens. But the main problem with him right now is his run blocking and his pass blocking. His pass blocking is just probably one of the most atrocious things you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah, it's definitely not his strong suit.
Not at all.
But
That's
we'll
not
get
what he's
in,
working
we'll get
out
into
with.
the draft some more in later weeks. Thanks for being on with us, Jackson. We really enjoyed it. All right, we're going to go ahead and take another break, and when we come back, we're going to be looking at some recruiting news and some reforms that the NCAA has introduced when we come back. Welcome back, everyone. Now we're going to go ahead and dive into some quick recruiting news, and then we're later going to touch on some of the reforms that the NCAA introduced earlier this week, right? Or was
Yeah.
it was
It was recently, yeah.
Yeah. But what were some notable things from recruiting?
Not much in terms of recruiting right now for coming in the later seasons. The big one's obviously going to be Xavier Thomas, the 2018 number one overall recruit. We know full well what he can do. He's going to go to Clemson, he says.
Trevor Lawrence, too.
And Trevor Lawrence.
Coming to Clemson, too.
And speaking of those two guys, if Clemson is able to knock both those guys and bring them in, they would be the first school ever to get the number one and number two overall recruits. Never happened before.
Oh, when I looked on ESPN earlier, I saw that Trevor Lawrence was at 3.
I think it depends on what place you look at. I guess what website you look at. But according to the one that they
got
use,
Jalen Hall right now, an undeclared wide receiver at 2.
okay. But I think even if he was rated third, they would still be the best.
It's impressive.
The best top-heavy recruits they would have ever.
Yeah.
So.
And looking at the 2018 ESPN top 300, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 out of the top 10 are undeclared, and then 5 of those that are declared, 2 of them have picked Clemson. The top 2 that have declared have picked Clemson.
And I think Clemson still got all those guys on the radar, so they could even land a few more. I mean, there's still plenty of fish out there to
winning a
fish out there
national
to fry.
championship certainly does not hurt your chances on the recruiting
It'll do
front.
it for you.
But for 2017, obviously Alabama's still at, I mean, we're looking at the top 5. You've got Alabama, you've got Ohio State, Georgia, which is pretty impressive to pull on a
Kirby Smart, good for him.
Kirby Smart, great recruiting class. Florida State, that's predictable. And then USC, who we touched on earlier in the show, is starting to, in my opinion, get a little bit of traction.
That was going to be the question. Can Clay Helton recruit? And it looks like he's been doing it, yeah.
I think it's working. I think Clay Helton's going to pull in a lot of talent. Now, Trevor Lawrence, if I'm not mistaken, is from...
He's from California.
He's from California, so that might have been one that slipped through the cracks for Clay Helton. But I'm telling you, I would not be surprised if USC starts sucking in all of that talent that UCLA took from them during that transition period when Sarkisian was there and they really weren't that solid. consistent, I guess is what you would classify them as.
Which is not what you want to see if you're in California and you're in a school not named USC. You do not want to see USC get back into the prevalence, taking away recruiting.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to hurt Stanford, and that's going to hurt UCLA.
For Clemson fans out there, 2 other notes real quick, not to do with recruiting. You had Scott Pagano, one of the defensive tackles from Clemson, transferred to Oregon. There would have been questions whether he was going to stay here or leave. He ends up leaving and goes to Oregon. Then Adrian Baker, a guy that's been kind of plagued with injuries the last couple of years. He's a cornerback. He's going to go to Oklahoma State. So a place where he can go in the Big 12 and not be expected to play too much defense, so which will be good for him. But moving on, we have the recruiting reforms that's recently come out. That's been a big talking point.
And these were passed on Friday, so last
Friday.
It's a comprehensive package of rule changes developed, and I'm trying to see if I can find a brief summary. Prospects will be allowed to take official visits paid for by the school from April 1st of their junior year through the Sunday before the last Wednesday in June. So before this change, official visits were not allowed before September 1st of a prospect's senior year.
Which is good. I mean, because if you're a coach, end of the year, before you look to next year, you want to start getting these guys recruited and be able to make these visits. I mean, there's no downside to it.
Yeah, the coaches are fine with this. They're, you know, I mean, the more visits and the more that they can entice those players with goodies and that sort of stuff, they're happy.
Another thing the NCAA did was they adjusted the they adjusted the signing periods. Now they expanded the ones in December and in June. And there was a little bit of backlash on that. The December one, obviously, all the coaches were fine with because there was no problem with that. But the June one, it was kind of interesting. If you look at it, a lot of them were saying that, you know, if you extend the period back early into June, a lot of these coaches will not be able to evaluate any of the students' academic performance from prior high school years.
Yeah.
And it might tempt some high school seniors to not even play their senior year if they recruit early.
That's one of my biggest issues with this whole early recruiting is I feel like I mean, it's one thing to leave college early and go professional. You know, basketball, you see that, especially football occasionally if they're, you know, really good.
But not high school.
High school, I don't like that. I don't like kids feeling like they can skip their senior year of high school because they're already being recruited by these big blue blood college football programs.
And you would hope that if a kid was ever thinking about that, have a coach just go and show them tape of Jadeveon Clowney sitting out an entire year and then going to the pros.
Yeah,
and
now
seeing
Clowney, I mean, yes, he had injury issues on top of him.
That's true, but
kind of, sort of, you know, not playing. And he's done better now in the NFL now that he has not been dealing with injuries. But yes, that's a great example. I mean, he basically realized that he was guaranteed millions of dollars and said, well, why should I care about this?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, my senior year of football. Or was it his junior year? I think it was his, because he didn't graduate.
Was it his junior year? I think it was. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's my biggest issue with this is, you know, recruiting in high school, especially, you know, junior year, that's early.
Yeah. The more the recruiting becomes such a big thing, the more it's going to be tempting for kids like that to say, hey, let me just wait a year and then go straight to college after that.
Yeah.
One of the other things that was kind of a little bit of buzz around was especially related to Jim Harbaugh in Michigan. He's been doing the satellite camps recently, off campus, kind of recruiting visits, stuff like that. NCAA just decided to ban that altogether. So only if you're going to do a coaching camp, you can only do that on campus, which I think is a good move.
I like that. I like that. I think that you shouldn't be able to go all, because, like, you know, we touched on a minute ago, Clemson snagging Trevor Lawrence. I mean, I know that obviously as a Clemson fan, you're biased and you want all the good guys to go to Clemson, but at the same time, I mean, your school should have to work to pull a guy like Trevor Lawrence from California.
You know,
I mean, a hotbed like of schools like USC, or I mean, I'm sure Texas had their eyes on him. I'm sure Alabama had their eyes on him, and Clemson probably had to work hard. But I don't think that they should be able to have camps all over the country.
You know, this really helps is the smaller schools because they don't have the ability. If you have the big boys coming in and taking them away, they have no chance then.
Yes.
So that's basically all they had with the reforms. I think they still have to vote on the June and the December signing periods, but it looks like December 1 will pass. June 1 remains to be seen.
Yeah, we'll just have to see. Well, we're going to take one more quick break. When we come back, we're going to wrap up the show. We're going to look at a feature piece that ESPN did not too long ago about a sports-only university. Stay tuned right after this. Welcome back, everyone. So we have a confession to make.
We do.
We
This
screwed
was
up.
lack of preparation on our
Thought
part.
that
Yeah.
Trevor Lawrence was from California. He's from Georgia.
Yep.
Hunter Johnson.
He's from a big football state, but it was not California.
So I guess it's still impressive that they were able to get him from Georgia, but not nearly as impressive as if he was actually from California.
Our apologies.
Yeah,
We'll
fed
never
some-
make that mistake again.
Yeah,
now.
fed a little bit of
Sorry,
misinformation.
sorry, Trevor, for that.
But now we're going to get into a last segment that we want to talk about, something that was actually really interesting, and it was an article that was done by Outside the Lines, which is like the reporting type of thing for ESPN, and it was looking at this university called Forest Trail Sports University, and it's an all-sports school. There's no academics involved. The kids basically, I was reading, and the athletes, because they had come from all over. There were athletes from California, and there were athletes from locally, like South Carolina. They were from Columbia and other places in North Carolina, and they would go to this school in hopes of getting an offer from a D1 or D2 school, kind of as a middle, like a junior college thing that
Something
you see
like that,
some
yeah.
like football players do.
Baseball especially.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was one of the highlights of this feature was the baseball team. And basically, this kind of went over all the struggles that that the athletes had at this school, and they were talking about, the living conditions were terrible, the food was really bad. I mean, it was just they had like to move campuses at the last second. They were taking online classes through another university, and then that backfired, so they had like no academic.
Kids were basically scammed.
Yeah, they basically were. I mean, there was no like athletic training involved when kids had accidents. I was reading this one guy who ran track re-ruptured his ACL, and the only thing they had for it was like ice.
If they're not through a school, I mean, if they don't have a medical program, then what are they going to do? I mean, they'd have to go to a local hospital, I guess.
And the cost of all that was too much for the university to bear. So basically, it was just kind of going over, again, all of the athletes that kind of missed out on a year of. I don't even think you could really call it eligibility.
Not really. It was basically just like
a wasted
AAU,
year.
but you're technically at a school. I mean, they were taking online classes, which I guess counts for something, but
Yeah, but if they don't transfer because there's just all sorts of issues.
It was very enticing. I mean, the way they described it was the couple that basically ran the place was really able to lure these kids in, convince their parents. There was one mom in particular that said, "Oh, the lady that runs this place just sounds like a second mom that's going to, nurture my child while he's there." And lo and behold, she was never there in the entire process at all.
I think it raises an interesting question, though. The whole reason that I wanted to talk about this is because do you think that later on down the road you'll see this pop? Like, if they're able to work out the kinks of this one and they have enough money, will this start to become a thing?
The only sport I could really see it working would be basketball, because you see all the one and dones that are going on with the lack of education really mattering that much. Basketball would be the only thing I'd really see that would maybe have a chance at this, but in sports like football and baseball, where you have to stay for 3 years, I just don't see this ever working. In baseball, we saw that it just didn't work at all.
Yeah, I just don't feel like that. And even if they were able to kind of restructure how everything worked and start over, I just don't think that it would be credible. It wouldn't have enough traction for scouts to really pay attention, because that's, they were kind of, the athletes were sold on this coming out of high school, that scouts would be there and they would, you would almost have like a leg up on kids that were playing at like a D2 school.
You'd have more time to practice all that,
pitch. And that obviously didn't turn out to be the case.
Not at all. Yeah.
So I think it raises an interesting question on whether or not it's something that could develop, because D1 sports are only getting more lucrative.
Exactly.
It's a
They're more
business,
important.
and it's all about money. And the idea, in theory, sounds like it would work.
Yeah.
But obviously, in this particular instance, with the particular people who were in charge of running it, it wasn't done appropriately. And I think the couple that was in charge, like I was reading, and they had previous run-ins with the law, and there was just financial issues all over the board. And they were also trying to operate other like charter schools and stuff at the same time.
It was a for-profit school.
Yeah.
Which
But
I read in there, they said that it's been working with like Grand Canyon, who's transferred over to D1. They're a for-profit school. They've recently had success, but they're also taking classes. So, I mean, that's a little different than what you see here. It's not just sports.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to, I don't know if it's that it needs academics to survive, but when you go to a traditional university, you have all that structure, all that stuff that's already put in place.
Yeah.
Which not only does that add credibility, it just, I just feel like it's a better environment to try and see. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
If you have the opportunity to go to a just sports school like this, like for instance baseball, then you should be able to go to an actual school in like D2 or D3 and still get exposure. Like I don't really see
But are you really getting exposure to D3 school? Like I think that's.
Did they get exposure?
No, but would they have gotten it if they'd have gone to, some D2 school or D3 school? And now, granted, some of these kids need to just accept the fact that they're not going to be professionals, and that's just how it is. That's life. But if that's what they really want to do, then what because really the education at a lower division school is probably not on par with a higher like a D1 school.
Yeah.
So you're not getting the exposure. You're not really getting the education. So if you're not even if you don't want to pay for the education, then you just go to an all sports school. I just think that's the question.
The only thing here's what I would do. If I was a student that I was coming in and wanted to get exposed but didn't want to really have education matter that much, I'd say take online classes. Just do like University of Phoenix online. And then they should have like
another
some
for-profit school.
Exactly. They should have some league that students can play, or not. I guess not students, but players can play in. During that time, that would possibly get exposure from scouts. Maybe playing like a Legion baseball league, which is a particular baseball league they play in to get exposure. Something along those lines. But this idea, I don't see it ever working. No. I don't think there's any way it could work.
I don't think it might resurface. You just never know, because again, the whole premise of this article at the end was that the couple that was responsible for this did not get in any legal or financial trouble because it was the North Carolina government stepped in and deemed that it was a private issue because the university wasn't receiving funds from the government, wasn't federally funded or whatever. So that's why they got off scot-free and could theoretically start this again if they wanted to. So I don't know. Interesting article, though. Really interesting read. I enjoyed looking.
I didn't even know about it before Outside the Lines before that.
I
hadn't even
just
heard
saw
about
it
it.
Outside the Lines and was like, wow, that sounds really interesting, and read over it. But yeah, I don't know. Interesting topic.
Yeah, well, it remains to be seen. I mean, for right now, it doesn't look like it's going to provide much traction, but maybe later down the road, someone might bring it back up again. Someone that can actually not get legal troubles or anything like that. Yeah, exactly. So.
Well, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for tonight's show. So for Bradley Kendall, I'm Jay Smith, and this has been After Further Review.